My name is Kylie Morgan, and I am 34 years old. 4 years ago, I lay in a hospital bed, alone, hooked up to machines that beeped with every heartbeat I almost lost. My three siblings knew I was dying. My mother knew I was dying. Not one of them came. They thought I would disappear quietly, and they would never have to think about me again. But I survived. And from that cold hospital room, I built something they never imagined I could. Now they come knocking at my door with tears and empty apologies. My answer is simple. Before I tell you everything, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if stories about rising from the ashes and finding your own strength speak to you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. You will not want to miss what comes next. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows your business. And Sunday dinners are supposed to mean something. My father, Thomas Morgan, worked as a mechanic at the local auto shop. He had rough hands from years of labor, but those same hands were the gentlest I have ever known. He was a quiet man who believed actions spoke louder than words. When he hugged me, I felt safe. When he told me he was proud of me, I believed him. My mother, Patricia, was a different story. She stayed home to raise us four kids, and somewhere along the way, she decided that love was a limited resource that had to be rationed carefully. Derek, my oldest brother, got the biggest portion. He was the firstborn son, the one destined for greatness in her eyes. She pushed him toward academics paid for his tutors and talked about him like he was already a senator. Megan, my older sister, came next. She looked exactly like my mother did in old photographs, and that resemblance earned her a special place. They would spend hours together, shopping, talking, laughing, in ways that felt like a foreign language to me. Then there was me, the third child, the quiet one, the one who got good grades but never got praised for them. I learned early that my achievements were expected, not celebrated. When I brought home a report card with straight A's, my mother would glance at it and say something like, "Well, at least you did not embarrass us." When Derek brought home a B plus, she would throw a dinner party. Brandon came last 4 years younger than me, the baby of the family. From the moment he was born, he could do no wrong. He broke things and got forgiven. He failed classes and got excused. He threw tantrums as a teenager and got comforted. My mother treated him like he was made of glass, too precious to be held accountable for anything. I remember one Thanksgiving when I was about 12 years old. I had spent the entire morning helping my mother cook. I peeled potatoes until my fingers ached, stirred gravy until my arm was sore, set the table with the good china that only came out twice a year. When the meal was ready and everyone sat down, my mother went around the table saying what she was thankful for about each of her children. For Derek, she said she was thankful for his brilliant mind and his promising future. For Megan, she said she was thankful for her beauty and her charm. For Brandon, she said she was thankful for his sweet spirit and his loving heart. When she got to me, she paused. I remember that pause so clearly. Then she said she was thankful that I was helpful around the house. That was it. Helpful. Like I was an appliance. Like I was the dishwasher or the vacuum cleaner. My father caught my eye from across the table. He gave me a small nod, and later that night, when everyone else was watching football in the living room, he found me sitting on the back porch, in the cold. He sat down beside me and put his arm around my shoulders. "You are worth more than they see," he told me. "One day, Kylie, you are going to do something extraordinary, and it will not be because anyone handed it to you. It will be because you built it yourself." I held on to those words like a lifeline for years. My father passed away when I was 19. He was working under a car when the jack failed. The doctors said he died instantly, which I suppose was meant to be a comfort, but it was not. Losing him felt like losing the only person in the world who truly saw me. After his funeral, something shifted in my family. Whatever warmth had existed drained away completely. My mother became colder, more critical, more focused on Derek and Brandon and Megan. I became even more invisible than before. I would come home from community college, where I was studying accounting, and my mother would barely look up from the television. I would call to check in, and she would rush me off the phone because Brandon needed something. I started working part-time jobs to pay my own way through school. I waitressed at a diner. I worked retail on weekends. I tutored high school kids in math. Every dollar I earned, I saved. I told myself that one day I would get out of that town, away from that family, and build a life where I mattered. But even as I pulled away, some part of me kept hoping that my mother would wake up one day and realize she had another daughter, hoping that Derek would stop looking down his nose at me, hoping that Megan would want to be my friend instead of my rival, hoping that Brandon would grow up and see me as a sister instead of an afterthought. Hope is a stubborn thing. It kept me tethered to people who never deserved my loyalty. When I turned 23, I finally escaped. I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and took a bus to Chicago. I had saved enough money for 3 months of rent in a tiny studio apartment and had lined up an interview at a small accounting firm. The day I left, my mother did not hug me goodbye. She told me not to come crawling back when things got hard. Chicago was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The buildings seemed to touch the sky. The streets were crowded with people who walked fast and talked faster. I felt anonymous for the first time in my life, and I loved it. Nobody in Chicago knew that I was the forgotten Morgan daughter. Nobody had any expectations of me except the ones I set for myself. I got the job at the accounting firm. It was entry level, the pay was modest, and the work was tedious, but I showed up early every day and stayed late every night. I learned everything I could from anyone willing to teach me. Within a year, I had earned a small raise. Within 2 years, I had earned a promotion. I was not getting rich, but I was getting by, and I was doing it entirely on my own. Despite everything, I still tried to maintain some connection to my family. I called my mother every Sunday evening. Most of the time, she would answer and immediately start talking about Derek's law career, or Megan's salon, or Brandon's latest girlfriend. She rarely asked about my life, and when she did, her interest lasted about 30 seconds before she changed the subject. Still, I kept calling. I sent birthday cards to everyone with small checks inside that I really could not afford. I sent Christmas presents that were never acknowledged. I told myself that family was family, that blood meant something, that one day they would appreciate me. When I was 27, my grandmother passed away. Grandma Ellen was my father's mother, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. She had always treated me differently than the rest of my family did. She remembered my birthday without being reminded. She asked me questions about my life and actually listened to the answers. She told me stories about my father when he was young, and through those stories, I felt connected to him even after he was gone. Grandma Ellen left me a piece of land in her will. It was a small plot on the outskirts of town, maybe 2 acres, nothing fancy. She had written a note that was read at the reading of the will. It said, "To my granddaughter Kylie, who has always had more strength than she knows, use this gift to build something beautiful." I cried when I heard those words. I cried because I missed her. I cried because she saw me the same way my father had. My siblings did not cry. They raged. The phone calls started within hours of the will being read. Derek called first, his voice cold and clipped like he was cross-examining a witness. He demanded to know what I had done to manipulate Grandma Ellen. He accused me of visiting her behind everyone's backs, of poisoning her mind against the rest of the family. I tried to explain that I had simply called her regularly, sent her letters, visited when I could afford the bus ticket. He did not want to hear it. Megan called next, and she did not bother with accusations. She went straight to insults. She called me a snake. She called me a thief. She said I had always been jealous of her, and that this was my pathetic way of getting back at the family. Her words cut deep, not because they were true, but because they revealed how little she thought of me. Brandon sent a text message, just one line: "You are dead to me." Then my mother called. I had hoped stupidly that she might be different, that she might understand. Instead, she told me that the right thing to do would be to sell the land and split the money 4 ways. She said Grandma Ellen had clearly been confused at the end and did not know what she was doing. She said that keeping the land for myself would be selfish and would tear the family apart. I thought about it for weeks. I lay awake at night wondering if my mother was right, wondering if I was being selfish, wondering if this was my chance to finally earn their love. In the end, I sold the land. The real estate agent found a buyer quickly, and after all the fees and taxes, I walked away with about $80,000. I kept $20,000 for myself, enough to pay off my student loans and build a small emergency fund. The rest I divided into 3 equal portions and sent to Derek, Megan, and Brandon. I did not tell them I was doing this. I just mailed the checks with a short note that said, "I hope this helps." Derek cashed his check and never thanked me. Megan cashed hers and then posted on social media about how she was redecorating her salon with money she had worked hard to earn. Brandon cashed his and gambled it away within 3 months. Not one of them called to say thank you. Not one of them acknowledged what I had given up. My mother called once after the checks cleared. She said, "Well, at least you finally did the right thing." Then she hung up. That was the moment I should have walked away. I should have recognized that these people would never love me the way I wanted to be loved. But I held on. I told myself that maybe I had not given enough. Maybe if I kept trying, kept sacrificing, kept putting them first, they would eventually see my worth. I was wrong. 3 years after the inheritance fiasco, when I was 30 years old, my life fell apart. The company I worked for had been struggling for months. There were layoffs every few weeks, and I watched colleagues who had become friends pack up their desks and disappear. I worked harder than ever, hoping that my dedication would protect me. It did not. On a gray Tuesday in November, my boss called me into his office and told me the company was closing its doors. Everyone was being let go effective immediately. I walked out of that building with a cardboard box of personal items and no idea what I was going to do. The timing could not have been worse. The economy was in free fall. Nobody was hiring accountants. I sent out hundreds of resumes and got back a handful of rejections. My savings, the $20,000 from the land sale, started draining away. Rent was due, utilities were due, food cost money, everything cost money. I moved out of my decent apartment and into a cheaper place in a rougher neighborhood. The building smelled like mildew and despair. The locks on the doors were flimsy. My neighbors screamed at each other through thin walls at all hours of the night, but it was what I could afford, so I made it work. The stress took a toll on my body in ways I did not expect. I started getting headaches that would not go away. I felt exhausted all the time, no matter how much I slept. Some days I felt dizzy, like the world was tilting sideways. I told myself it was just anxiety, just the pressure of unemployment, just temporary. I could not afford to go to a doctor. I had lost my health insurance along with my job, so I ignored the symptoms and hoped they would pass. One evening in early February, I was heating up a can of soup on the stove when the dizziness hit harder than it ever had before. The room spun. My vision blurred. I reached out for the counter, but my hands would not cooperate. I remember falling. I remember my head hitting something hard. Then there was nothing. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived across the hall, heard the crash. She knocked on my door, and when I did not answer, she called 911. The paramedics broke down my door and found me unconscious on the kitchen floor, my skin burning with fever. At the hospital, the doctors ran test after test. They told me later that I had bacterial meningitis, a serious infection that had been building in my system for weeks. My brain was swelling. My organs were starting to shut down. They put me in the ICU and hooked me up to machines that breathed for me, that monitored my heart, that pumped antibiotics into my veins. I was in a coma for 2 days. The hospital found my emergency contact information in my wallet. The number I had listed was my mother's. A social worker called her and explained that her daughter was in critical condition and might not survive the night. My mother's response, according to the social worker who would later tell me, was brief. She said, "Kylie is an adult. She can handle it." Then she hung up. She did not come. She did not send anyone. She did not even call back to check if I had lived or died, but she did tell my siblings. I know this because months later, when I had access to phone records, I saw that she had called Derek, Megan, and Brandon the same night the hospital called her. She told them I was sick, and each of them made a choice. Derek chose his career. He had a big case coming up, and he could not spare the time. Megan chose her convenience. A flight to Chicago was expensive, and besides, I had always been dramatic. Brandon chose nothing. He simply did not respond. When I woke up 5 days after being admitted, I was alone in a room that smelled like antiseptic and hummed with medical equipment. A nurse came in and smiled at me with tired eyes. She told me I was lucky to be alive, that my infection had been severe, that another few hours without treatment could have killed me. I asked her if anyone had come to see me. Her smile faltered. She shook her head. I did not cry then. I was too weak, too confused, too numb. I asked her if I could borrow a phone to call my family. She brought me the hospital phone, and I dialed my mother's number with trembling fingers. She answered on the third ring. "Hello, Mom." My voice was barely a whisper. "It is Kylie. I am in the hospital. I almost died." There was a pause. Then she said, "I know. They called me. But Brandon was going through a breakup with his girlfriend. He has been so upset. I have been busy taking care of him. You understand?" I did not understand. I would never understand. "I could have died," I repeated. "But you did not," she said. "So you are fine. I have to go. Brandon needs me." She hung up. I called Derek next. He answered impatiently, like I was interrupting something important. When I told him I had been in a coma, that I had nearly died, he sighed. "Kylie," he said, "you have always been fragile, always the victim. Honestly, if you had died, would anyone have been surprised? You need to toughen up and stop expecting people to drop everything for you." He hung up. I called Megan. She laughed when she heard my voice. "Oh my God, are you seriously still playing the sick card? We all know you are just doing this for attention. Grow up, Kylie." She hung up. I did not call Brandon. I already knew what he would say or not say. That night, alone in my hospital bed, I stared at the ceiling and let the truth wash over me like cold water. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had left me to die. They knew I was in danger, and they chose to do nothing. They hoped I would disappear. They expected me to fade away quietly, so they would never have to think about me again. For the first time in my life, I stopped hoping. I stopped wishing they would change. I stopped believing that if I just tried harder, loved harder, gave more, they would finally see me. They had shown me exactly who they were, and I finally believed them. I left the hospital with a stack of medical bills I could not pay and a body that felt foreign and weak. The doctors had warned me that recovery would take months. I was supposed to rest, to take it easy, to let my brain heal from the trauma it had endured. But I did not have the luxury of rest. I had rent to pay and no income. I applied for every assistance program I could find. I qualified for food stamps, which allowed me to eat something other than ramen noodles. I found a free clinic that would monitor my recovery and refill my prescriptions. I negotiated a payment plan with the hospital that would take years to complete, but at least kept collectors from knocking on my door. I took odd jobs to survive. I cleaned houses for people who could afford to hire help. I babysat children for neighbors who needed a few hours of peace. I delivered groceries for tips that rarely covered the gas money. Every dollar I earned went toward survival. There was nothing left over for dreams. But something had changed inside me. The brush with death, the abandonment by my family, it had burned away the parts of me that were willing to settle. I was not going to spend the rest of my life scraping by. I was not going to let the people who had wished me dead be right about me. I started waking up at 5 in the morning before my first job of the day. I used the free Wi-Fi at the public library to take online courses in financial planning and investment strategy. I read books by people who had built fortunes from nothing. I studied their methods, their mindsets, their mistakes. I filled notebook after notebook with ideas and plans and goals. At the food bank where I picked up groceries every other week, I met a woman named Sandra. She was in her 60s with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and glasses that made her look like a stern librarian. But when she smiled, her whole face transformed into something warm and welcoming. Sandra was a volunteer at the food bank, but I learned that she had been a chief financial officer for a major corporation before retiring. She had spent 40 years climbing the ranks of corporate America and had walked away with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Now she spent her time giving back to the community that had raised her. We started talking during my visits to the food bank. She asked about my background, and I told her about my accounting degree, my years of experience, my current situation. She asked about my goals, and I told her I wanted to start my own financial consulting business someday, a firm that would help ordinary people make smart decisions with their money. Sandra looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "You have fire in you. I can see it. Most people who have been through what you have been through would have given up by now. But here you are, studying at the library, working 3 jobs, making plans. That takes a special kind of strength." She became my mentor. She taught me things that no textbook could teach: the unwritten rules of business, the art of negotiation, the importance of building relationships. She introduced me to people in her network, former colleagues and business partners, who might be able to help me. She believed in me when I struggled to believe in myself. A year after my hospitalization, Sandra told me about a job opening at a small financial consulting firm downtown. It was an entry-level position far below my experience level, but it was a foot in the door. She had already put in a good word for me with the owner. I nailed the interview. I got the job. The salary was modest, but it was stable. It came with health insurance. It came with opportunities to learn and grow. I threw myself into the work with everything I had. I arrived before anyone else and left after everyone had gone home. I volunteered for projects that no one else wanted. I asked questions, constantly absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Within a year, I had been promoted twice. Within 2 years, I was leading my own team. I was building a reputation as someone who could take complex financial problems and find simple, effective solutions. And through all of this, I did not contact my family. I changed my phone number. I did not update my address with anyone who might pass it along to them. As far as they knew, I had vanished. When I turned 32, I was ready to take the biggest risk of my life. I had saved enough money to survive for 6 months without income. I had built a network of contacts who trusted my expertise. I had a clear vision of what I wanted to create: a financial consulting firm that specialized in helping small business owners and entrepreneurs manage their money wisely. Too many brilliant people with great ideas failed because they did not understand finance. I wanted to be the person who kept their dreams alive. I resigned from my job on a Friday. On Monday morning, I filed the paperwork to register my new company. I called it Phoenix Financial, a name Sandra had suggested. She said I had risen from the ashes like the mythical bird, and my company should carry that story forward. Sandra invested $25,000 in seed money. She said it was not a loan, it was a belief. She believed in me, and she wanted to be part of what I was building. I promised her I would make her proud. The first 6 months were brutal. I worked out of my apartment to save money on office space. I knocked on doors, sent emails, made phone calls, attended networking events. Most people said no, some people said maybe, a few said yes. My first real client was a woman named Tara, who owned a small bakery that was bleeding money. She had poured her heart into her business, but had no idea how to read a balance sheet. I spent hours with her going through her finances line by line, finding ways to cut costs without sacrificing quality, creating a budget she could actually follow. Within 3 months, her bakery was profitable. Within 6 months, she was expanding. Tara referred me to 2 other small business owners. They referred me to 3 more. Word began to spread. The woman from Phoenix Financial gets results. Then came the opportunity that changed everything. A young entrepreneur named Marcus reached out to me through a mutual connection. He was 26 years old and had created a tech startup with revolutionary software that could transform how small businesses managed inventory. He had a brilliant mind for technology, but admitted freely that numbers made his head spin. Investors were circling, offering millions, and he had no idea how to evaluate their offers or protect his interests. I spent 3 months working closely with Marcus. I helped him understand the financial implications of each investment opportunity. I negotiated terms that gave him control over his own company, while still bringing in the capital he needed. I created financial projections that showed exactly how his business could scale. His startup was acquired 18 months later for $42 million. Marcus walked away with life-changing wealth and the freedom to pursue his next idea. He credited me publicly in every interview he gave, calling me the financial genius who kept me from making a catastrophic mistake. That endorsement opened floodgates. Suddenly, my phone was ringing constantly. Entrepreneurs, investors, established business owners, they all wanted to work with Phoenix Financial. I hired my first employee, then my second, then my fifth. I moved into a real office in downtown Chicago, with windows that looked out over the city. By the time I turned 34, Phoenix Financial had 22 employees, revenue in the millions, and a reputation as one of the most effective financial consulting firms for entrepreneurs in the Midwest. I had been featured in business magazines. I had spoken at conferences. I had built something extraordinary from absolutely nothing. I bought myself a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. I bought a car that did not break down constantly. I bought nice clothes that made me feel powerful when I walked into rooms. But I did not buy these things to show off. I bought them because I had earned them, because I could, because the girl who had been invisible and forgotten and left to die deserved to have beautiful things. I never forgot where I came from. I still volunteered at the food bank once a month, standing beside Sandra, as we handed out groceries to people who were struggling the way I had once struggled. I established a scholarship fund for young people from difficult backgrounds who wanted to study finance. I mentored women who reminded me of my younger self, talented and driven, but lacking the connections and resources to get ahead. I had built an empire, and I had done it entirely on my own. But I knew that someday, somehow, the people who had abandoned me would find out. And when they did, they would come looking for the girl they had left for dead. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my desk reviewing a proposal when my assistant buzzed through to tell me I had received a message from an unknown sender. Normally, she would filter those out, but something about this one made her think I should see it personally. She forwarded it to me. The sender address was unfamiliar, but the name at the bottom of the message was not. Patricia Morgan. My mother. I stared at that name for a long time before I opened the email. Dear Kylie, it read, I have been searching for you for months. I found your company's website and could not believe my eyes. My little girl running such a big business. I am so proud of you. I know we have had our differences in the past, but I want to make things right. I miss you. I miss my daughter. Please come home. We need to talk as a family. Love, Mom. I read the email 3 times looking for some acknowledgement of what she had done. Some recognition that she had left me to die in a hospital 4 years ago. Some hint of an apology. There was nothing. Just a vague reference to differences, as if we had disagreed about something trivial like holiday plans or politics. I did not respond immediately. I needed time to think, to process, to decide how I wanted to handle this. I saved the email and went back to work. Over the next 2 weeks, more messages arrived. My mother wrote again, this time with more urgency. She mentioned that her health was declining. Her heart condition had worsened, and doctors were recommending surgery. The procedure would be expensive, and she was worried about how they would pay for it. There it was, the real reason she had come looking for me. Derek's email came next. He did not waste time with pleasantries. He wrote that our mother needed help, that as her children we were obligated to contribute, and that my unexpected success meant I had the means to make a difference. He mentioned casually that his own finances were tight due to his divorce proceedings. His wife had hired an aggressive lawyer, and the settlement was draining his accounts. He expected me to step up. Megan's email was a masterpiece of manipulation. She started by pretending we had always been close, reminiscing about childhood memories that I remembered very differently than she did. Then she pivoted to her own troubles. Her salon was failing. She had taken out loans she could not repay. She was facing bankruptcy and losing everything she had worked for. She knew I would want to help my big sister in her time of need. She ended by saying she had always believed in me even when others doubted me, and she knew I would make the right decision. I almost laughed at that one. Megan had never believed in anything except her own superiority. Brandon's text message was the shortest. Kylie, I am in trouble. People are after me. I owe money, and they are threatening me. Please help. I will pay you back, I swear. You are my sister. I saved all of these messages. I read them over and over, searching for any trace of genuine love or remorse. All I found was entitlement. They did not miss me. They did not want a relationship with me. They wanted access to my bank account. I could have ignored them. I could have blocked their addresses and pretended they did not exist. That would have been the easiest path. But something inside me needed closure. I needed to look them in the eyes and say what I had been holding inside for years. I needed to close this chapter definitively, with no ambiguity and no loose ends. I booked a flight to Ohio for the following weekend. I did not tell them I was coming. I arrived at my mother's house on a Saturday afternoon. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint faded and peeling the yard overgrown. I parked my rental car at the curb and sat there for several minutes gathering my courage. Then I walked up the cracked sidewalk and knocked on the door. My mother answered. Her face lit up when she saw me, but I noticed immediately how the light turned calculating. Her eyes swept over my designer coat, my leather handbag, my manicured hands. She was assessing my worth. Kylie, she exclaimed, you came? Oh, my baby girl, I knew you would come. She tried to hug me. I did not hug her back. Are the others here? I asked. Yes, everyone is inside. Come in, come in. I walked into the living room where Derek, Megan, and Brandon were waiting. They had arranged themselves on the old couch and chairs like they were posing for a family portrait. When they saw me, their expressions went through the same transformation my mother's had: initial surprise, then assessment, then greed. Derek stood up and extended his hand like he was greeting a business associate. Kylie, you look well. Very well, actually. Megan stayed seated but smiled widely. Look at you. So sophisticated. Chicago has been good to you, hasn't it? Brandon nodded awkwardly and mumbled something that might have been hello. I did not sit down. I stood in the center of the room and looked at each of them in turn. 4 years ago, I said, I was in a hospital in Chicago. I had bacterial meningitis. My brain was swelling. My organs were failing. The doctors did not know if I would survive. The room went very quiet. The hospital called you Mom, I continued. They told you your daughter might not live through the night. Do you remember what you said? My mother's face paled. That was a long time ago. I was confused. I was stressed. I did not understand how serious it was. You said I was an adult and I could handle it. Then you hung up. I turned to Derek. And you? You told me that if I died, no one would be surprised because I had always been weak. You told me to toughen up. Derek's jaw tightened. I was in the middle of an important case. I said things I did not mean. You meant every word. I turned to Megan. You laughed at me. You said I was playing the sick card for attention. You said I needed to grow up. Megan looked down at her hands. I did not realize how serious it was. None of you came, I said. I woke up in that hospital room completely alone. No flowers, no cards, no family. The nurse looked at me with pity because not a single person had visited me in 5 days. Kylie, my mother said, her voice trembling, we made mistakes. We know that now, but family forgives. Family moves forward. I shook my head slowly. You do not want family. You do not want me. You want money. You found out I'm successful, and suddenly you remember you have another daughter. You did not reach out to reconnect. You reached out because Mom needs surgery she cannot afford, because Derek is losing his fortune in a divorce, because Megan is going bankrupt, because Brandon gambled himself into debt with dangerous people. That is not fair, Derek said, his voice rising. We are still family, whether you like it or not. You have an obligation. I have no obligation to you, I said. I stopped having any obligation to you the moment you left me to die. I nearly did die, Derek. Do you understand that I was hours away from being gone forever, and not one of you cared? Megan started to cry. You are being cruel. We are sorry. We are all sorry. Can you not find it in your heart to forgive? I looked at her tears and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not satisfaction, just emptiness. I have forgiven you, I said. I forgave you a long time ago because holding on to that anger was poisoning me. But forgiveness does not mean I have to let you back into my life. Forgiveness does not mean I have to pretend the past did not happen. And forgiveness definitely does not mean I have to give you money. Please, my mother whispered. I am your mother. You gave birth to me, I said. That is true. But you were never really my mother. A mother does not ignore her child's report cards. A mother does not forget her child's graduation. A mother does not hang up the phone when she finds out her child might be dying. You chose Derek and Megan and Brandon over me every single day of my life. Now I am choosing myself. I pulled my keys out of my pocket. I hope you figure out your surgery, Mom. I hope your divorce settles fairly, Derek. I hope you find a way to save your business, Megan. I hope you find a way out of your debts, Brandon. I genuinely hope things work out for all of you. I walked toward the door. But my door is closed, permanently. Do not contact me again. Do not show up at my office. Do not ask mutual acquaintances to reach out on your behalf. We are done. You cannot do this, Derek shouted. You owe us. You are nothing without this family. I turned back one final time. I became everything I am precisely because I had no family. You taught me that I could only count on myself. Consider it the one valuable lesson you ever gave me. I walked out of that house, and I did not look back. The drive to the airport was quiet. I did not turn on the radio. I did not make phone calls. I just drove through the familiar streets of my hometown and let myself feel everything. There were tears, more tears than I expected. Not because I regretted what I had said. I meant every word, and I would say it all again if I had to. The tears came because I was grieving. I was grieving the family I had always wanted but never had. I was grieving the childhood I should have had. I was grieving the fantasy I had held onto for so many years, the fantasy that someday, somehow, they would love me the way I deserved to be loved. On the plane back to Chicago, I stared out the window at the clouds and thought about my father. I wondered what he would say if he could see me now. I hoped he would be proud. I believed he would be proud. The next few months were a time of deep healing. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Rivera, who specialized in family trauma. For the first time in my life, I talked openly about my childhood, about my parents, about my siblings, about the hospital, about all of it. She helped me understand that the rejection I had experienced was never about me. It was about them, about their limitations, their fears, their inability to love properly. She also helped me see that I had spent my entire life seeking approval from people who were incapable of giving it. I had measured my worth by their standards, instead of my own. Building Phoenix Financial had been an amazing achievement, but part of my drive had come from a desire to prove them wrong. Now I needed to learn how to succeed for myself, not as a response to their rejection. I took her advice to heart. I started setting boundaries at work, delegating more, taking actual vacations. I invested in friendships that I had neglected during my years of grinding toward success. I spent more time with Sandra, who had become something like a mother to me, a real mother who showed up with chicken soup when I was sick and celebrated my victories like they were her own. I also started opening my heart to the possibility of new family, not blood family, but chosen family. My assistant Maya, who had been with me since the early days of Phoenix Financial, became one of my closest friends. Marcus, the tech entrepreneur I had helped years ago, became like a brother to me. We had dinner together once a month, swapping stories about business and life and dreams. I was not lonely anymore. I was surrounded by people who loved me for who I was not, for what I could give them. 1 year after my confrontation with my biological family, I launched a new initiative through Phoenix Financial. I called it the Second Chance Scholarship, and it provided full financial support for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds who wanted to study finance or business. The recipients were chosen not just for their academic potential, but for their resilience. They were kids who had faced obstacles that would have crushed most people and kept going anyway. Kids like I had been. At the first scholarship awards ceremony, I stood at a podium in front of 50 young scholars and their families. I told them my story, all of it. The neglect, the abandonment, the hospital, the food bank, the slow climb upward. I told them about the family who had left me for dead and about the family I had built for myself. Family is not just blood, I said. Family is the people who show up. Family is the people who believe in you when you struggle to believe in yourself. Family is the people who love you not because they are obligated to, but because they choose to. I looked out at those young faces, some of them crying, all of them listening intently. Some of you come from loving homes with supportive families. I am so happy for you. Cherish what you have. But some of you know exactly what I am talking about. Some of you have been told you are not enough. Some of you have been overlooked and undervalued and made to feel invisible. I want you to hear me when I say this. You are enough. You have always been enough. And the people who could not see your worth were limited by their own blindness, not by anything lacking in you. That speech was one of the proudest moments of my life. I think about my journey often now. I think about the girl I was at 19 losing her father and losing her only protector. I think about the woman I was at 30 lying unconscious in a hospital with no one coming to save her. I think about who I am today at 34, running a company that changes lives surrounded by people who love me finally at peace. If I could go back and talk to that younger version of myself, I would tell her to stop waiting for her family to see her value. I would tell her that she was going to go through fire, but emerge stronger than she ever imagined. I would tell her that closing the door on toxic people is not cruelty, it is self-preservation. I would tell her that she deserves happiness and success and love, and she does not need anyone's permission to pursue them. The family that raised me left me for dead. They expected me to disappear. Instead, I built an empire. When they came knocking at my door with their hands out and their excuses ready, I told them the truth. My door is closed forever. Not because I hate them, I do not have the energy to hate them anymore. My door is closed because I finally understand that some relationships cannot be fixed, and trying to fix them only destroys you. I am not a victim anymore. I am a survivor. I am a builder. I am someone who turned betrayal into fuel and built a fire that warms, not just my own life, but the lives of countless others. If you are watching this and you have been through something similar, if you have been hurt by the people who were supposed to protect you, if you have been abandoned